My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sankaran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue with the discussions on the Katha Upanisha. And if you see, we covered the last time on what is this self. And here, um, this whole notion, remember the conversation is between Nachiketa, young boy, and Lord Yama. And he's asking about death, what happens after death. And here, Lord Yama is explaining to him, taking him through the concept of what perishes and what does not perish. So here he talks about the individual self and the cosmic self. And in the last session, I covered the description of these Upanishad in the context of chariot. And there are 11 parts to the chariot. It starts off with the path that we are taking. This is our material universe, right up to the self and the cosmic self. So here, in the last discussion, we discussed about how this cosmic self is, which is a manifestation of that Brahman, or in Hans language, this God, or this, state of infinite possibilities, how this great self is superior to the intellect, and it is superior to, all the collective intellect that we have. It is the manifestation of the pure consciousness, and it is also it gives rise to this cosmic self, or the Brahman gives rise to something we define, something called Hiranyagarbha, which is actually the golden womb, the source of all creation. When we mean source of all creation, you'll see that it is about our material universe. And I'll go a little bit more deeper today to discuss what this material universe is, with a little bit more description, and you'll see it's very similar to some of the discussions that we had when we covered Mahan's teachings and also other great saints' teachings. So let's start with this. I'm going to give you a kind of a visual description of this Brahman, as we covered in the last time. But, we covered it, but I'm going to give you a visual so that you're able to cognize things better. So here it is. So here, think of, what we are trying to do is that there are self, which is individual self, and the cosmic self. The gross to the subtle. This is from the object to the subject, right? In Mahan's language, the small I, the big I, kind of different languages that people use, but they are all trying to describe this. So think of this cosmic, the Brahman, as this, the background here, just absence of everything. So call it Brahman, in this. So think of how Lord Yama is explaining to Nachiketa. So Brahman, this cosmic self, which is unmanifest. So there is neither matter, nor energy, nor time. It's formless, dimensionless, timeless. Time is not present. So here, think of that background. The black background is dimensionless, formless, and timeless. So this is this state or substratum that, Lord Yama is explaining. This is really important because the moment you say timeless, then the notion of birth and death does not arise. And so why is it that we feel it? So he's going to take us through this evolution. I took you through this using the chariot framework. You would see this description. I also gave this description when I covered Mahan's version of that Irul right up to our own consciousness, material consciousness. So here it is, in another way, how Lord Yama explains to Nachiketa. So think of this, the surface black is formless, dimensionless, timeless. Okay? And he says the emergence of multiverse. And today we know this. And from this formless, dimensionless, timeless, we see that infinite universe exists, right? One can ask why. Well, if it is infinite potential, if this was, formless, dimensionless, timeless, infinite potential and possibilities, this multiverse, this is multi-dimensional, this universe, you have infinite possibilities of universe with different laws of the universe, different laws of physics, right? Our universe is four-dimensional, three-dimensional space and time. But there may be other universes that have higher order, higher dimension, different laws of physics. The nature of time is very, very different. So here and today you see that science is converging to this phenomena. So if you see here in this, Lord Yama is explaining to Nachiketa, yes, we have that Brahman, the cosmic self, unmanifest, formless, dimensionless, timeless, but it gives rise to the what we call that infinite possibilities. There are multiple universes, what we call multiverse. And one of that universe is actually our universe. So among all the infinite universe, our universe is one of the infinite possibilities. And the birth of our universe, and this is explained here. He says, look, we have space and time in a scientific way. This expansion of universe that takes place. This is what is described in that scripture as the cosmic universal womb, the source of all creation. Creation means creation related to that space-time continuum. And this is what the Hiranyagarbha in that the Sanskrit world is, the cosmic womb that gave rise to all things in this material universe. And, this is where if you see our universe, as science can date it back to about close to 13.8 billion years. So here, one of the multiverse verses is our universe that gives rise to space and time. So here in the scripture, Lord Yama is explaining that this is the source of creation. And he describes, in the source of creation, you have all these different particles and different universes and, multitudes, infinite universes, very similar to infinite, multiverses. Here is that within our own universe, there are infinite things that, from energy to matter to particles to galaxies to a whole host of things, right? So we see that this universe, our universe, at least we can predict is about close to about 3.8 billion, 13.8 billion years. And so again, we see that the whole idea of this creation started with this spark. Mahan calls it primordial atom. Scientists call it the Big Bang. Whatever it is, in this scripture, it describes this, what we call the cosmic womb that gave rise to everything. Interestingly, everything in this universe has this imprint. You see how stars are formed, you see how life is formed. It all has that same imprint with this one, the primordial atom. So again, it describes this beautifully. So Lord Yama is describing this to Nachiketa. Right? So he then goes on to say, okay, from this universe emerge our own Earth, right, which gives life to all forms, and that too has infinite varieties. He says there are many things, multitude of life forms. So you have Earth that gives rise to, life forms, multitude of life forms, from basic, elements, right up to more complex beings. So he explains this. And one of the most complex being is our own human personalities. So he says that the human individual self, this is the human personality now, comes from this material earth, which is of this universe, and this universe comes from that, unmanifest. So the DNA in everything in our universe has the same DNA of that unmanifest. So while this, our universe manifests in many creations, stars and galaxies, it manifests that, and life forms, including our own human life forms, all that has a lineage to that unmanifest. So again, and you see that the human personality or the human individual self was shaped through this evolution. So he describes this, and he goes on to explain this very beautifully that while you see form and you see all the characters, our mind is so focused on form because this material identity is caught in that space and time continuum. And because time is there and the time is moving in a linear way, there is expansion, you see that there's continuous, emergence, sustenance, and then dissolution. In the dissolution, you have new things emerge, right? Combination of things that emerge. So he's explaining this evolution. So here, then he explains this is really important, which is he says that Maya is the active principle of the Brahman. Brahman is unmanifest. So it is an active, it's a dynamic part of Brahman. So Brahman has got this potential, unmanifest, but there's also a manifestation of Brahman. Maya is actually that the manifestation, no manifestation is possible without Maya. Why is that the case? Because in our material universe, we have space, time, and time changes everything. As time moves in linear, things change. And he says that Maya is part and parcel of our universe, this material universe. So nothing can be manifested without Maya. So remember that the primordial atom, right? You have time built-in space, and that's moving forward, and everything from there is imprinted with that, including our human body and our human personality. So he says, no manifestation is possible without Maya. So Maya is part and parcel of life. So he says that the Hiranyagarbha, the great self, Mahat, he says that is said to be the manifestation of the Brahman. So he says, even the cosmic womb or the Hiranyagarbha, the great self, which is, it's also a manifestation of Brahman. You see? But Maya makes the first manifestation possible. So he says that because of space and time is there, time is inextricably tied to Maya. He says that Maya makes it possible, this whole creation is possible because of Maya. So Maya is superior to that, he says, the Hiranyagarbhas, which is the creation itself. So what gives life to the creation is that Maya, the ability to change over time. This is what the beautiful part is explaining. A very, very subtle point. So you may have a primordial atom, but if there is no time, then that expansion, creation doesn't make any sense. So Maya is only possible because time is, imprinted in there. So he said Maya makes this first manifestation possible. So again, he says that so Maya is superior to that Hiranyagarbha, that primordial womb, right? Then he goes on to say something very interesting. So I want you to watch this. So the change that we are seeing in life, the change in this universe is because of Maya. What Maya means what? That which is changing, right? Sometimes we say truth and Maya. Me purul, Maya purul. Me means permanent, whereas Maya is that which is changing. So we see everything in this universe is changing, from our body to our personalities to our mind, everything. So we are caught up in that illusion. We are caught up in that Maya. And that's why we find it very difficult to go back to that experience of that Brahman, right? Because that which is unmanifest. So it is, when the mind is so caught up with this material body and the material experience, it is very difficult to decouple. So he says, Maya is so superior to the creation of everything. Right? So then he goes on to explain, but Maya by itself cannot do anything, right? Brahman must be there as a witness. Now, why I put this picture is that I show this picture with continuously changing. But I put this picture here to show you that while the silhouette has a human form, what's beneath that silhouette is looks exactly the same as the unmanifest Brahman, right? The dark, formless dimension. So here it is, he's explaining, while we see that glow that gives us that human personality, deep beneath that glow, there is that cosmic self of the Brahman, the human personality in that Brahman form. This is human personality as an individual self. This is the presence of the cosmic self. So he's now distinguishing between the human personality, which is caught in that Maya, and the human personality that is transcendental to the Maya. So for me, in this context, it is very similar to Mahan's teachings of small I and the big I. So here he beautifully writes in this part that, but Maya itself cannot do anything. Brahman must be there as the witness of that change. He says, so therefore the Brahman is superior to Maya. It is that which is omnipresent, you know. So Brahman is the greatest. So there is that Brahman in our human, that underpin our human personality. He says that Brahman is the greatest, the subtlest, the inmost, right? Deep at the core of our personality. He says that is the highest point in growth, right? Without that, there's no manifestation, there is no expansion, and so on. You see, that is the cosmic self. So, in the picture I show you here, remember I started off with that Brahman, which is that formless dark space. The human personality has a silhouette, but deep inside that silhouette, that Brahman, that formless, is present. He says that is what the cosmic self that is deep within us. He says, but most of us are caught up with that silhouette, that the human form, and and all those things, and that is continuously changing, as is this, right? So even how much development, you see that we start off as a fetus, and then we become an infant, and then slowly we mature, and by the time we hit 60 and 70, our body starts benko or bend, eventually gets bedridden, and it's dissolved. That is the human form, human personality. That is that, what we call that individual self that is continuously changing. But deep within that individual self, that is that cosmic self, that Brahman, that is timeless, formless, dimensionless, that is transcendental. He says, Nachiketa, there is two parts to this human personality. Most people are caught in that individual self, and that is why they fear death. So here it is explaining. So the goal of an individual is to attain that union with that cosmic self, it says, right? So you say by this union, the individual self becomes the cosmic self. So we slowly transition from that human personality that is caught up by space and time. We then slowly decouple from that and transition towards that cosmic self that is transcendental to space and time. He says, that transition. So here, for me, that discussion that Swamiji had of this convergence, the transition from the individual self to that cosmic self. So very nicely. So while we have the silhouette of the human personality that is continuously changing and caught up by time and space, deep within all of us, there is that cosmic self, and oftentimes we miss it, right? So where did it come from? If you see that cosmic self, well, we can say the human personality comes from Earth and then comes from our universe, and then you trace it back all the way to the primordial atom, and even past that, it comes back to that formless, dimensionless. So one has to think of that lineage in a much more deeper way. So here he explains this. Well, why is it that we don't get it, right? So here in passage 12, in page 105, he says that the self is hidden in all beings, right? It is not noticed because we're so caught up in that human material silhouette. Only the discerning seers, only those who are very, very attuned and deep through their sharp, penetrating intellect can perceive this. And this reminds me so much of Mahan's passage. He said, Utru, Utru, Noka, Noka, Ipparamum, Apparamum, Yega, Paraparamum, Yennul, Nanarinden. This passage is actually very, very aligned to Mahan's quote on this. So here he's explaining this is hidden in us, right, in all beings. Because all beings come from that Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic womb, which is a dynamic version of that Brahman, which is this cosmic self, right? So here, so know that all of us are manifestation of that Brahman. So then it goes on to explain. So now I'm going to explain why is it that we get it and why sometimes we don't get it. So watch that picture. That silhouette gives us a human personality, but deep within that silhouette, we have that cosmic self, which is unmanifest, which looks exactly the same as that Brahman when I first started, without anything on the screen. Formless, dimensionless, timeless. So that dark patch within us and the dark patch outside us looks exactly the same, right? So here, why is it that we get it? So Nachiketa had all this question, how come, why is it that we don't get it? So Lord Yama then explains here, right? So he says, well, to attain the cosmic self has been described as the highest goal. So to attain that within us, that Brahman within us, that is the highest goal of everyone. But we don't see it, right? So he knows that, he explains this, and this is the question, Nachiketa, is, yes, you're saying this, but why is it that we cannot cognize it? Why? So he says that because we only see what is on the surface, not beneath it. So we're only seeing our material personality, who we are, what our names are, what our positions are, what our titles are, everything related to the material. So we spend most of our lives and most of our time on our human material personality, right? From the time we are, we conscious of our own existence, we become attuned to the body and then everything else related to the body and that material universe. So very little time we allocate to know what the true self is, the cosmic self. Particularly in the world of modernity today, everything is about, alluring things about the material world and desire. So the mind is so numbed by materiality. The mind is so caught up by the gravity of materiality that it's very difficult to break away from that gravity, right? So how do we transition from that gravity, break away from the gravity of personality, the gravity of materiality, to the gravity of that universality that is embedded in all of us? So this is the next explanation that Lord Yama makes. gives Nachiketa here. So this is on page 105 of the book. So he says, whatever we do, we attribute it to our body, our mind. But these are only tools. So the body is an instrument. So we associate our whole personality with a name and a title and all those things. And so we are so caught up. So when the body is losing its grip, we become afraid. When the body is dying, we are frightened, right? Or when we start losing our ear or ear side, our hearing or our sight, we panic, right? So he says that's because we're so attuned to this material world, material identity, or material personality. When that's slowly slipping, we get worried, we get preoccupied, right? So he explains this why we don't get it. We are unable to cognize that transcendental self, that Brahman or the big I. So he goes on, he says, within our material personality, there is an invisible agent, right? We all know this, but we don't know how to access it, right? So we sometimes call it insight, we call it different names, right? So here he's explaining there is an invisible agent making them do whatever they are doing. So what we see, what we hear, all those things, there is an invisible agent that is giving us that cognition and consciousness, right? He says, but we don't focus on that. We are only focused on that seeing and the object. We're so caught up by the desire and the experience, but we don't ask the question, who is it that is generating this desire and how am I generating it? What is the source of all this, right? So he says that within us, that invisible agent is there, right? That is manifesting everything. So he says somewhat like a puppet show. You see the puppet show, the puppet is moving, but the puppets don't do things on their own. He said there is someone that is holding and pulling the strings, right? So if you see wayang kulit, right, you see the shadow play, but you see that there is somebody giving sound, there is somebody moving things that gives the animation, right? He says that someone is pulling that string so that you have an impression that the puppet is acting. So we think our human personality is acting without knowing what is driving this, right? So he's explaining this to Lord Yama is explaining to Nachiketa. So he says, in the same way, we see our organs acting. So we do things, we have a brilliant idea, we have all those things. But he says, we see our organs acting, but they do not. He says there's an individual self, whatever name that he called. But in this, they call individual self. He says, within, by its mere presence, the mere consciousness itself makes them work. I mean, you see what sight means. I'm seeing something. The light is hitting my retina, right? And then that's transmitted into signals and that's registered into my brain. Something is converting that into image. What is that? And that's what he calls that self that gives us that consciousness. So this is why when we die, he says that all our organs remain intact, yet they cannot work. So you can have all the puppet, but if you don't have the guy who actually animates and gives music and that oral thing, the puppet is non-functional, right? So while it's still there, the puppet is there, it doesn't have life. So he's explaining that our life doesn't mean anything without knowing about this invisible agent or this self. He says, this is why at death all our organs remain intact. That's why it cannot work. So if you see very clearly, in our deep sleep, not all our organs go to sleep, right? Because the material mind just goes to sleep, right? Then he goes on. He says, this is because the self has left the body. In death, the self has left the body. So the presence of the self makes the organs function. So without the self, the organs cannot function. So he says it's somewhat like a magnet, right? Making the iron fillings, when you put, the iron fillings on the paper and you move it, it moves. And there's a force that moves those iron, bits, right? And that power is actually coming from the magnet. He says within all of us, there is that power that animates, that enables us to experience, that enable us to know things. He says, we're so focused on our material personality, we don't allocate time to know that invisible self, that cosmic self. Yet, without knowing that, we think that we are a material identity and we have all this ego and the pride and all those things. But there will be a stage where this ego and the pride will slowly start diminishing when the body starts slipping, right? So, but he goes on to explain, but if you know this cosmic self, even though the body is slowing down, your mind that is anchored on that cosmic self will always be, inspirational because it's transcendental. So he goes on to explain this. So the whole question then is that this part is very important because he's now taking you through what is real and what is unreal, what is perishable and what is imperishable, what is permanent and what is impermanent, right? He's explaining this. And the chart here gives you that the chart on the left-hand side, the picture on the left-hand side shows you that that black patch or the hero state is also present in us. It's the formless. But if we focus on that material personality, the silhouette, that will continuously change. But what does not change is that which is within that silhouette, right? So he says that if the mind is focused on that material identity, the mind will go through continuous changes. And this is where you see that the Sukha Dukkha cycles, the birth death cycles, all these things become preoccupied by the mind. The day the mind starts anchoring on that self within, the sheet within, the substratum within, you see that the silhouette can change. But that self, that patch within or that substratum within is changeless. This is what Swamiji Ennul Nan Arinded. Ennul means within me I have realized that self. So he says, so he's now distinguishing in this discussion, he's distinguishing between that which is changing, which most people are focused on. That's why they're so worried about death. But he says, Nachiketa, there is another substratum in all of us. If you focus on that, that notion of Maya, you transcend that Maya because time and space does not matter. You become transcendental to that. When that happens, that whole question of death becomes very clear to you. But to do that, one really need to know how to get from the material individual self to the cosmic self. And you see in the next few passages, he describes this, and those who are practicing meditation intensively will know what the next steps are. So here it is. So what are the requirements to attain that cosmic self? Right? I spoke about that individual self that all of us know. We have our name, we have a title, we have all our material identity, right? And you see, very interestingly, we have a birth certificate, and then when we die, we have a death certificate. We give back the death certificate and our IC to the government, saying that this person doesn't exist anymore, right? So please remove him from the record. Anything that happens after this doesn't matter because the person is no more there, right? So here it is. As long as the cosmic self, our mind is focused on that individual self, that change will experience the change, right? But to transcend that, the mind needs to anchor itself on the cosmic self, which is transcendental space and time. That inner substratum that looks exactly the same as that Brahman. Actually, it is the Brahman itself. So the question then is, what are the requirements to attain that cosmic self? What is it that we need to do to transition from our material identity to that cosmic identity, the material self to the cosmic self? And here is where that you'll see in the next few passages, it talks about how that introspection, contemplation, reflection, meditation is so important to attain that cosmic self. And if you go back to the earlier part of that boons of Lord Yama was asking Nachiketa, the reason why he was asking that is to test him to see whether he is still focused on that individual self that is allured by this material world and the desires and so on, or is he somebody that is, transcendental to that? So, and this is where you see in Boon 2, Nachiketa asks, can you teach me that which gives me that higher order of existence? And he teaches him that meditation. Yet, even after that, he still was not convinced, Lord Yama. He says, for one to really understand death, they need to understand that cosmic self. To know that cosmic self requires tremendous amount of discipline to break away from the gravity of materiality to that gravity of the cosmic self. When one understands that, one will understand who they are, what they are, and what this material world is, and how to live in an, though we have a finite body, to live infinitely. Though we have a mortal body, we are anointed with immortality. Though our body is perishable, our cosmic mind is imperishable. And he's slowly leaving that steps for him to get there, to have that understanding of what happens after death. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to ask you to read 106 to 107 right up to 114. And in that, he shows what are the steps, what are the requirements to attain that self. What do great people, what do wise ones, what do Mahans have done uniquely to attain this cosmic self? So for me, this next few parts are so important because Mahan actually has taught this. He says, etada tatparam. He says the abode of this cosmic self is not easy for an ordinary human mind. Yeti, attempting and attempting, in many, many facets of looking things, he couldn't attain it. He says, Utru noko. He said, when I switched within and then started looking within myself, he says, I discovered that cosmic self in me. Aparamum means that external cosmos. They are both interrelated. So he's talking about how the Brahman manifests as the Hiranyagarbha and all the creation, including the material personality. He says both Iparamum, Aparamum, Yega, Paraparamum, Yenu, Nanarindit. He said, I have experienced this through understanding that cosmic self. So Mahan has put that footstep, and you'll see in this scripture, from 13 to 17, he actually describes what Mahan has been speaking about. So I will let you read it. I won't, and I'll touch on it next week. I hope all of you all now have a better understanding of what that death is by separating the two. They're actually one. It's just that it's two sides to the same coin. Okay, I will stop here, and the next class I want you to read ahead so that when I explain it, it'll be much more easier. Sandosham.